Live and in color from the NBC News radio broadcasting studios of KCAA, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, and 106.5 FM, located in beautiful Southern California, and in parallel from the Turfs Up radio studio in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Thanks for tuning in to the Water Zone show this evening.
And a pleasant afternoon to everyone listening, wherever you are, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon. And I'm Rob Starr, along with the wonderful, smart guy. I can't even think. I think I used every adjective I could figure over the 10 years of how to describe this guy. But Mr. Chris Davey.
You know, there's other parts of speech other than adjectives, buddy. Don't give up.
Well, I can't use those on the radio.
Right, you are. I'm doing okay. Enjoyed a visit to your state last week, buddy. It was I had a good time in Arizona.
Good. The weather was nice for you.
Nice. You could fry eggs on the sidewalk. It was 106. How'd you work that out?
That's why I have a chiller on my pool.
Yeah.
So, excuse me.
Yeah.
Something caught in my throat. Anyway, so you're back now in California, Southern California. How is it there?
You know, it's cold. It's a little bit breezy. It's been drizzling and wet all day, but I think we've got a good Easter weekend coming up, buddy.
Good. And how's Mrs. Austin doing?
Hey, we're doing great up here. Beautiful day up here. We got the tomatoes in the ground, and they're starting to grow. So, we're happy up here. Things are good in my little corner of the woods.
Well, since Chris left my territory, it dropped down to 78 degrees. So it's we don't have the
less hot air.
Less hot air.
Less hot air. Okay, yeah, okay.
Well, he told me to come up with other things besides adjectives, so I'm trying. Anyway, what's new in the water world, Miss Austin?
Well, it's dry times down in L.A. now, isn't it?
No kidding.
Even though they had the rain, some rain there, and they were able to capture some stormwater. They're way behind on. Looks like just under 8 inches through March, where they should have had generally 13 inches by that time. So that makes a big difference. So for the environment down there. So that's not good for fire season and all that sorts of stuff. But the one interesting thing is because Southern California gets a large chunk of its water supply from Northern California. Up here, our reservoirs are looking good. We got snowpack in the mountains that's starting to melt. So water supply is in good shape this year. And actually, Metropolitan, which is the largest supplier, wholesaler of water to Southern California, serves most of Southern California. They are in a surplus condition, so they are putting water into storage this year. So, even though the environment is in a drought, Los Angeles's water supply is not. Southern California's is not. So that's one of the benefits of having a diversified water portfolio, I guess. Of course, the Colorado River is not in good shape, and that's another chunk of water for them. But when they're in surplus, like they are with the State Water Project, they're moving water into storage. So there's good news on that front.
No, the more water, the better. Because I hear LA County is kind of low.
Well, it's the water comes from elsewhere, and the elsewheres are all doing pretty well, except for the Colorado River. So, and in other news, we had a big update at the State Water Board earlier this week, talking about implementation of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or what we lovingly call SGMA. Sigma implementation is well underway, and while most of the basins in the state have turned in plans that have been considered adequate, there's 7 now that have not. And when a groundwater basin doesn't have an adequate plan for sustainable management, it goes over to the State Water Board for intervention, meaning that the State Water Board is going to come in. They're going to start charging people who pump groundwater on an amount per fee, and the groundwater agency needs to correct its deficiencies before, and if they can correct the deficiencies in their plan and the plan passes muster, then the State Water Board intervention ends and they get out of the way, and it goes back to local control. So, we'll see. This is all new, very new for California, that they're having any intervention in groundwater management at all. And it takes a very long time for these things to wind their way through the State Water Board. They started last year, and so far they have 2 basins have been put on probation. The first one went on probation, and they filed a lawsuit, so everything is waiting on that particular basin until the lawsuit is resolved. And the second basin, the Tule Basin, they are on probation, and they're getting ready to start, entering in and reporting their extractions and paying those fees. This is a really difficult part. These fees, the legislation that forms Sigma says that the State Water Board has to charge fees to cover the cost of the State Board intervention. So these fees can really add up. And it's very hard for these farmers who are already cash-strapped to be paying these fees and at the same time be paying fees to their groundwater agency that's working on their plan. So these fees are a very big problem, as you can imagine, for farmers in these basins. The other basins that are lined up for, possible probation hearings have all returned very vigorously to their back to their agencies and have been working very hard to produce plans that pass muster, and a couple of them have succeeded in getting their hearings postponed or canceled for the time being. So we're seeing a real effort to get these plans and these basins into shape. These 6 of the 7 basins that are, in this possible probation process, they're all what was considered critically overdrafted, meaning they were the groundwater basins in the worst shape, and they had to produce their groundwater plans faster, 2 years faster than the other groundwater basins that weren't considered critically overdrafted. So these are sort of the worst case scenarios, the basins that have it the toughest, that are facing this intervention process. And it's very hard. It's very difficult for those farmers and for, the people that live in that basin as well.
I think it's probably a tough one for the farmers and the agencies, Chris. But on a little lighter note, though, because we talk about, plants and animals a lot on the show, and that's where I like to go. I was surprised at the water hyacinth article that was on there because, it sounded to me like a turnaround in favor of water hyacinths. The last time we were talking about them, was because they were an invasive species. So, what's happening there?
Well, they still are very much an invasive species, and they really are problematic. But not every impact that a species has on an ecosystem can be bad. And this is an interesting one. Water hyacinth, so pretty, very pretty plant.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how it got into the Delta or, where it spread, but I think a lot of people have it in their little water features, and maybe it got there. Aquariums also spread invasive species, so I'm not sure how it got there, but it is all over the Delta. And it clogs up marinas. It just covers canals from side to side and ongoing, which blocks the sunlight from getting to the lower, to the underwater. It makes a lot of changes in the system. But water hyacinths, they filter water, and they can filter out contaminants, and they also filter out now apparently microplastics. So it's not, their impact is not necessarily all bad, but the impact that it does have in the Delta is indeed bad. We can't say otherwise. It's, like I say, clogs the channels and impossible to eradicate, and they have to spray it with aquatic pesticides to keep it in control. So, there's not really a reason to applaud water hyacinths, but because they are a real pervasive problem. But at least there's no microplastics. So there you go.
Can I go back to your last topic for a second?
Sure. Yeah.
With the farmers and the stigma.
Yeah.
Now these farmers been farming for what, 100 years or so, or more?
Oh, yeah. It's it affects all sorts of farmers. Some of them are farmers been farming for a long time. Some of them are big industrial farms. Actually, the ones that they kind of looking at the 6 basins that are the 6 critically overdrafted basins. There's just a handful of landowners own the majority of the land, and then the remainder is a large amount of small growers, of small farms. Right. And that is a real difficult thing. Because, large farm has a large amount of acreage. Okay, maybe we have to fallow some land for our groundwater. But if you're a small farm, you probably need every acre working for you because you want to make a living at this. That's why farmers farm. Right. So, so it is a very serious situation. But if you deplete all the groundwater, and then nobody farms, and right. It's very hard to live there. Domestic wells go dry, all of that. So it's a very difficult issue.
There's no way the farmers can find extra dollars to pay for all of these things, or they're just going to have to fold.
Well, I mean, there's not really help for farmers with water costs because the money is going to pay for these groundwater management plans. What's really needed is for the state to continue with these programs that kind of help with the lands that have to transition out of production due to lack of water. And how to deal with these large amounts of small farms is an issue that I think is just sort of starting to get more attention from the state, and they're starting to put more resources out for these small farmers. But the problem is that if there's no water, money doesn't replace water. I mean, you can buy water from someone, but if no one has water and you have money but there is no water to buy, it's not very helpful. Right. If you're trying to water your crop, You're
absolutely. I don't know if you get the information that Chris and I get sometimes. They're having a big story about this atmosphere water harvesting and how they're using them with farms and things of that sort. So maybe that's something that California can look into and the farmers can. Anyway, enough of that. I just wanted to touch base on that. I know Chris has a burning question that he wants to ask you about what's happening with salmon.
Oh, well, that's a quickie, Rob. Yeah. That's a quickie. I saw the article, Chris, and it looks like no salmon for you.
Yeah, and a very short recreational salmon season, if there's a bright spot, although people are very concerned even about having any of that. It's low salmon numbers mean no salmon, no commercial salmon fishing for a third year in a row.
Right.
And this is really difficult for those commercial salmon fishermen. I mean, you used to be able to make a living at this, and 3 years of no fishing is very devastating to them.
Yep, absolutely. All right, go ahead, Rob. You're on mute there, buddy. So.
Oh, sorry, I was trying not to cough, so sending you a message. Anyway, excuse me, everybody. I've got something in my throat, aside from my tongue. I don't know what it is. Anyway, we got to take a break time, and I want to tell Miss Austin we adore her every single week, coming on and giving us the latest in California water news. For our listeners, please look it up at mavensnotebook.com. It is the greatest source of water news in California that anybody can get. She does it every single week, and again, I think she only gets 3 hours sleep a night, maybe, but she just crunches on and does a lot. So, and if you want to become a sponsor, you do the same thing. Go to www.mavensnotebook.com and take a look at it. Give it a shot. You're going to enjoy it, and it's going to continue to give us a great sense of news every week. So, Chris, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you and your hubby and family have a wonderful Easter weekend, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right. Good evening, everyone.
Have a great week, Chris.
All right, we're going to take a little break and come back with our featured guest, and stick around. We'll be back in just 1 minute.
One of the most time-saving tools I found for my customers is our app and our e-commerce feature. So customers actually have the ability to view all of their quotes in one place. If you contact your Site One seller, you'll be able to log into your account and see all your quotes in one place. And instead of jumping on the phone or waiting for your seller to call you back, you can approve it right from the website, and it will send a message to your sales rep to get it on order and reserve the material. Customers can learn more about these tools at their Site One branch, from their local seller, from their local CX specialist, and from SiteOne.com, or by downloading the Site One app.
Welcome back to the Water Zone Show with Rob and Chris, and hope everybody's having a great weekend. We have an exceptional guest today. His name is Mark Lopresti, and Mark Lopresti is Market Rebellion CEO and Chief Market Strategist. He's a Wall Street veteran with over 25 years of experience in alternative investments, having started his career on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange working for Lehman Brothers. Along with leading Market Rebellion, Mark was a recognized securities law and corporate finance attorney, venture capitalist, an experienced economist, and family office expert. Mark appears regularly on Fox Business, Newsmax, NewsNation, CNBC, SiriusXM Radio, Bloomberg, and Reuters. He's also been quoted in numerous publications, including Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, Investors Business Daily, Barron's, and many others. So, Mark, welcome to the Water Zone Show.
Well, thank you so much, Robert. It's a pleasure. And with that introduction, I can only screw things up from here. So thank you for that.
No, I think you're talented. You'll do a great job. You're used to bigger audiences than we have, but we appreciate it. So let's start getting some questions here. So you are the CEO and Chief Marketing Strategist for Market Rebellion, which is one of the country's premier financial platforms. What trends are you seeing these days?
Well, as Chief Market Strategist at Market Rebellion, one of the responsibilities that I have, in addition to being CEO, is helping our members stay on top of and anticipate trends in the marketplace, which, of course, In recent weeks and since the beginning of President Trump's second term has been somewhat challenging because we've gone to a market that is driven less by fundamentals and by technical trends, which we have a much easier time anticipating, to headline driven or a tape bomb market, as we've sort of come to call it. Today's was a great example of that. Obviously, with the recent tariff tantrum, as it's been described. So we are helping the members of the Rebel Nation, as we call folks that follow Market Rebellion and are part of our community, trying to make sure that they stay calm and don't panic, protect their portfolios, and hopefully even make money even with this extreme volatility. And then we expect that, given the style of this new president, that we are going to continue for the foreseeable future, even once we've dealt with the tariff situation, to be in a market that is driven less by, again, fundamentals and technical trends and how markets perform over time, seasonality and things of that nature, to something that is far more reactionary and headline driven. So definitely interesting times and a little bit more challenging, but we like an intellectual challenge.
Things that Jamie Dimon from Chase and some others, what do most people ask you about these days? Because do you think the market is driven by politics more than the stock market?
Well, so the two questions that we get most frequently these days is, one, are we going to go into a recession, right? Some argue that we are already in a recession. You mentioned Jamie Dimon, who said recently very famously that there's a 60% chance that the country winds up in a recession before the end of this year of 2025. I'm not in that camp. So that's one question that we get asked an awful lot. Another question is it time to start buying? Has the correction in the markets, has the tariff tantrum come to an end? Because a lot of retail investors and a lot of the folks that watch the programming that we participate in on Fox Business or any of the other shows that we do, see a lot of stocks that they want to be part of, the names like Nvidia and some of the tech darlings that were just prohibitively expensive previous to this correction that started in February, and are considering now getting involved. In fact, in the last 2 days of the week that ended just a couple of days ago, we saw a massive flow of retail investors coming into the marketplace, particularly buying ETFs, excuse me, but also buying individual names. And again, a lot of those names that were a bid up significantly in the bull market, and those inflows, excuse me, came in primarily on the 3rd and 4th of March. And then the last thing that we get asked a lot, Robert, is what's going to happen with interest rates. I think people have come to a realization, even folks that are not involved in a day-to-day basis in the stock market, a realization of just how much monetary policy and interest rates can impact inflation, impact their daily lives. We have a housing market in this country that is sort of hopelessly stuck. We've had the lowest existing home turnover in the country's history, and that's continued month over month. And so a lot of people are asking, when are interest rates going to come down so that mortgage rates can come down and hopefully unlock some of that inventory in the real estate market? Because we've become a nation of renters, unfortunately, and that's very sad, because owning your own home is a fundamental part of the American dream, and I think we need to get back to that. But we're not going to get back to that until we see some rather significant rate cuts from Jerome Powell and this Fed, which prior to the tariff tantrum, we were not expecting to see beyond 25 basis point cuts between now and the end of the year. The Fed futures tool, which is what we use and we watch to try to anticipate, and that's an investable instrument, by the way. It's less so than a predictive indicator, although its predictive qualities are pretty accurate, are now indicating that we could have possibly as many as 5 25 basis point rate cuts between now and the end of the year. So that remains to be seen, but until we start to see significant change in monetary policy, we are not, unfortunately, going to see any significant improvement, particularly for first-time home buyers or for folks that want to go from renting to owning. So those are sort of the main things that I get asked at cocktail parties and in the grocery store from people that recognize me from television.
That was a great synopsis, Mark. For sure. I mean, we've been doing this for 10 years now, as we were discussing before, and had a lot of people on. And I don't think we've seen a financial market like this in those years. So, Mark, I know that there's a ton of stuff that we could talk about, but I want to see if we can focus on water just a little bit because we're called the Water Zone. So. Just asking a question about, your background as co-founder of Market Rebellion. You've done a tremendous amount of work, I'm sure, in the water space as it relates to investing. A lot of activity that Rob and I have been involved in just this year has been in the startup space, right? A lot of pitch events and stuff like that Robert and I have covered. There's other podcasts out there that focus solely on the financial or the investment segment. So today, right, in terms of like utility companies, water utilities especially, how do you define what a safe investment is? Do you think there is a safe investment these days in the water segment?
There are, but I don't know that I would look at the utilities primarily because of the issues around water contamination, which I know we're going to talk about, and that's a topic that is much more related to my legal career than my current role as the CEO of Market Rebellion. It is a crowded space, and you have to sort of distinguish between, are you talking about B2C or consumer products that are in, the sort of home filtration space, which I think there's a lot of opportunity as we start to look at the elimination of the more complex and forever chemicals from, our taps and showers and things at home. I think a lot of the opportunity from an investor perspective is probably more around that as well as in emerging markets. I mean, water is so fundamental to everything. People don't often think about water and access to clean drinking water as an economic issue, but it's very much an economic issue because unless you have access to a consistent and reliable supply of clean drinking water, you cannot flourish economically, and we still have a lot of parts of the developing world that unfortunately do not have reliable access to clean drinking water. So there's a lot of emerging market opportunity as well from an investment perspective, but also, as I said, things related to new technologies that are designed to help remediate and remove forever chemicals from municipal drinking water supplies and systems. And the reason for that, and I don't want to jump the shark, as they say, and get into the forever chemical part of the show, but the traditional means of removing or remediating these forever chemicals from municipal drinking water supplies is using a carbon capture filtration process. And that, unfortunately, is really sort of trading one environmental problem for another environmental problem. So you've remediated or you've gotten rid of the PFAS or the forever chemicals, but now you have to do something with these chemical-laden carbon filters that sort of have to be treated and stored, transported, and disposed of, almost like nuclear waste. There's really no great environmentally sound or economically sound solution for that. So the other big investment opportunity, and there's a number of companies in the space, both public and private, that are some of which we're invested in, that are developing solutions that address the contamination problem at the molecular level, both more cost efficiently and without, as I said, trading one environmental problem for another.
Yeah, well said. I couldn't have made a better argument myself. But so I'm going to tell you, in the shows that we've just done, we did a series on produced water that was very very good. We've got a couple of shows coming up that are going to address carbon neutrality in the water industry, the
Mm.
energy nexus in the water industry, because
Oh, yes.
yeah, it's a very very energy intensive energy consumption industry. So we look forward to that. But and I know you said you didn't want to bounce right into some of the PFAS stuff, but I'm going to ask this question because I know you've done quite a bit of work in the federal courts, right? Especially on the 3M water systems issue. It's got a ton of press coverage, not just from you, but the press in general, as it's particularly related to PFAS manufacturing. And I've followed some of the reports that you've done from 3M as it applies to the U.S. public water supplies. A lot of stuff on environmental remediation, and I think the report from 3M was about this time last year, I think, Mark, if I remember that it came out. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. So even though I am retired from the practice, I still get asked by some of my friends that are in the mass tort and the multi-district litigation space to consult from a strategy perspective, particularly as it relates to the development of the initial client pools in some of these matters. And of course, the case, the multi-district litigation, the class action, as most listeners would probably think of it, that was filed in South Carolina against 3M, DuPont, and 21 other distributors, manufacturers, or contributors to the manufacturing process of what we refer to as PFAS, which is a category of forever chemicals, and we can talk about what that means, that had its origins in the late 1930s, actually, in conjunction with the development of nonstick surfaces like Teflon. And unfortunately, what was discovered over the years, and it was discovered initially as a result of illnesses that were suffered by workers in the 3M and DuPont facilities that were working with this chemical, was that this is a very, very toxic, very noxious, very harmful chemical that can lead to a variety of different cancers and birth defects and really, really nasty stuff. And unfortunately, the very short version of the story is that through a variety of ways, these chemicals have found their way into our water supply. And the level of contamination varies geographically. A lot of it relates to the proximity of a water system or a particular reserve of water, of course, to these manufacturing facilities. There are other ways that these chemicals have gotten into the water table. Another one is firefighting foam. So these chemicals were used extensively in firefighting foam. So you find a very high concentration of these chemicals, unfortunately, in communities that are around airports, because when they do firefighter training for putting out aircraft fires, these things are used and have been used in very large quantity. And unfortunately, they're referred to as forever chemicals because it is virtually impossible, if not completely impossible, to entirely eliminate these chemicals from water. So what the goal is with remediation and removal is to get the amount of these chemicals to a level of detection that is so small that it is considered unharmful for us to ingest. So one of the two lead law firms, Stagg Liuzza, it's a New Orleans-based law firm that's co-founded by Mike Stagg, who's a good friend of mine. Mike was one of the lawyers pioneering this lawsuit against 3M and DuPont. Asked me to consult on this, and we helped bring awareness and then participation in the case, primarily around the Northeast, to a little over 13 or 14 large municipal plaintiffs. I won't mention them by name, to preserve their confidentiality. But we're talking very large-scale water systems in the Northeast that serve millions and millions of folks. And as you guys probably know, the first settlement in the case against, I should say against, but as it relates to 3M and DuPont, who are sort of the two primary culprits and main defendants, we reached a settlement last year as it relates to the drinking water component of the case with those two defendants for over $13 billion in damages. It's the largest mass tort settlement in history, at least up until that point. Bigger even than asbestos. And the reality of it is that money, which is yet to be distributed, it's the first distributions are sort of in the next couple of months, we're being told, and that money is going to be provided to those plaintiffs for the purpose of using the funds to get as much of this terrible chemical out of their drinking water system. Again, using these remediation techniques. The problem, gentlemen, this is another thing that we could talk about. You mentioned sort of the large companies and operators of municipal drinking water systems, because that has largely been privatized. There are two companies that operate, I think it's over 3,000 of those systems that many, many millions of Americans use. They are hesitant to use some of these new technologies that address the problem at the molecular level, because the carbon capture and carbon sequestration model is tried and true, and they're so concerned about entering any kind of a new substance or touch point into these municipal water supplies that they're reticent to adopt them. So, complicated problem. It impacts a massive percentage of the population. It's really scary how many municipalities find that they do have levels of PFAS contamination in their water systems that are beyond either what the acceptable level is from an EPA perspective, and of course those rules were changed last year, to as it relates to what the acceptable level of PFAS contamination is in municipal water supplies, to also what's even acceptable from a personal health perspective. So really scary stuff. Really scary stuff.
Mark, let me ask a quick follow-up question. I know Rob's going to peg you on a couple of other things coming up here, but just as a follow-up, a lot of public water agencies in the country already have plans, or even better than that, right? They're already enacting some remediation efforts as it relates to PFAS and other chemicals in the water. But as we know, sometimes those efforts have been poorly funded. What kind of difference do you think that this, almost $12.5 billion settlement, what kind of difference do you think it's going to make to these water industries? Is it going to be just a little trickle, or you think it's going to be major, Mark?
No, we think, and the new PFAS standard is for the forever chemical family of forever chemicals, because unfortunately it's not just one. Is four parts per trillion, which is a drop of a drop of a drop in a swimming pool, and which of course highlights the challenges and the issues as it relates to the remediation of this stuff. And the short answer is, we think it's going to make a huge difference, and it being the receipt of these funds from the class action, from the multi-district litigation. Many of the municipalities that we talked to either were unaware of the problem, remarkably, particularly smaller municipalities, or even if they were aware of it, certainly did not have or do not have budget for it. As you can probably imagine, many municipalities in this country do not operate with budget surpluses. It's quite the opposite. Yeah. And the other thing is, there's been a sort of a bit of a reticence, to be candid, to make too much of a stink, if you will, about this issue, because of concerns about winding up with people, sort of showing up, with torches and pitchforks at your local, town hall and commissioner meetings, because, of course, what happened in Flint, Michigan, and other places where water supply contamination was such a headline issue. It's something that people are generally aware of, and I think that part of the reason why there was a bit of a kicking the can down the road on the part of elected officials and municipal bureaucrats was just to sort of avoid a panic, right? But when the EPA changed the acceptable amount of forever chemicals in municipal drinking water last year to that 4 parts per trillion that we just referenced, along with a lot of the media and notoriety around the settlement that was achieved in the MDL against PFAS, against 3M and DuPont, has certainly raised awareness of the issue. But for many municipalities, without the funding from the case, they did not have a way to deal with this remediation problem. Is the simple answer. So we feel pretty good about it from the perspective of actually bringing some assistance and some hope to these folks.
Mark, the case is really about water contamination and, talking about how widespread it is in your opinion and what is water contamination. We covered the problem they had in Jackson, Mississippi with some of the water agencies, the mayor and citizens were on the show. And it was pretty interesting that, there was never money to fix the problem, and the new places that they have to clean the water, the treatment plant is too far away, and they can't deliver the water because the infrastructure isn't there. But I also been hearing, Bobby Kennedy Jr. is talking about fluoride in the water.
Yeah,
and they should remove that. What do you see in things like that? I mean, I know California has a lot of small water agencies that can't take care of the contamination, as you said previously. Even on a bigger scale, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money, and the only ones that are going to pay for it are the citizens. And I just see all these things that people are trying to throw into water and take out of water. Where do you stand on things like that? Or where do you see the future is going to be with things like fluoride and all these other things they put into it?
Well, listen, so that's a multifaceted question there.
Yes.
And, one thing I will mention, which is another reason why we're very happy with the success that's been achieved in the MDL with 3M and DuPont. And by the way, just for ratification of you and our listeners today, that is only what we refer to as phase 1 of the case, and it's only as it relates to those 2 defendants, and that is only as it relates to municipal drinking water. Mm-hmm. Phase 2 then gets into groundwater contamination. There are a host of other defendants that are not part of that initial settlement, so we're hoping that this is the first part, notwithstanding obviously it being rather significant and an eye-popping $13+ billion number, that there's a lot more money that will be coming back to these plaintiffs to be able to help address the problem, because we do not believe from a fundamental fairness perspective that just passing on the cost of remediation to consumers, right, and having their water bill go up. And by the way, by some estimates, we would be talking about people's water bill going up 3, 4, 5 times. That, of course, depends on where you are in the country, the level of contamination, the relative financial strength of the water provider. But it's pretty scary stuff, guys. I mean, there's I think about 9,000 sites around the country that have confirmed, and these are sites that have been tested, so we don't even talk about what still has yet to be tested. Over 9,000 sites that confirm have levels of PFAS in excess of the EPA accepted level for it to be considered not harmful around the country, impacting about 50% of our population. And I think as testing and awareness continues to go up, unfortunately, that number goes up even more. I mean, we're talking about 160 million people in this country. So it's a really, really serious problem. I'm excited about RFK and hopefully a radical approach to some of this stuff. I think we need a more radical approach. I think the problem and I like that he's talking about fluoride. I'd like to hear him talking a little more about forever chemicals, and maybe he is, and I just haven't heard, which is entirely possible. But the problem that he has is, of course, the substantial budget cuts that are going on, and the overall effort on the part of the Trump administration to reduce the size of the government, to reduce the amount of money that's spent, and this is an area that, from what I understand, is also on the chopping block. So it makes it even more important for municipalities to get involved in these cases and to get as much money get as much money back to them from these defendants, who in some cases, and this is kind of part of the for 3M and DuPont, part of the reason why the settlement amounts were so eye-popping. I mean, unfortunately, the extent of how harmful this stuff was known for a really long time, and yet, they continued to expose not only their own workers, many of which developed all kinds of horrible cancers and had children with birth defects, but the general public through the contamination of our public water supplies and our groundwater. So really, really, really scary stuff. And there's been a few documentaries that have been done about it, which will probably leave people going out and looking for the newest and latest home water filter, because a lot of what people are using right now, and I won't say the names of products, but that you have sort of for your own home water pitcher filter is not designed to address forever chemicals,
No.
Unfortunately.
I can't even imagine the recent fires they had in California with all the fire retardant stuff that got into the water systems and the aquifers and even down to the ocean. It's got to be horrendous. I mean, you're talking billions of dollars just to correct that. But Chris, jump on in with another question.
Yeah, I do have another one, because you mentioned DuPont just a little while ago. We talked about 3M a lot and quite a bit, but I know that the smaller case that you were talking about with DuPont and a couple of other companies that were involved there, Corteva, I think, for example. Can you tell us a little bit more? What happened with that case? That's obviously not a $13 billion case, but what happened with DuPont?
Well, in terms of so 3M and DuPont were part of the phase 1 settlement that we were just talking about for the municipal water supplies. So there are many, many other defendants in this case, in this particular MDL. And by the way, this MDL, this class action, relates primarily not to individuals. So there's another class action for firefighters that may have individually have been exposed, sort of like an asbestos style thing. There's other companies that are involved, particularly in the MDL, again, that were either participating in the manufacturing or the distribution of these chemicals, Tyco, BASF, and others. And there's a couple dozen defendants that are still yet to come to the table to settle, and we expect that they will, although it could certainly take, and is expected to take, years, as these cases often do, unfortunately.
How safe do you think, in your opinion, Mark, is much of our drinking water contaminated, and what grade would you give it?
Well, it's hard to paint the entire country with the same brush.
Right.
I'm in New York City right now, which is actually known, although many people wouldn't believe it, for actually having a pretty high quality and high standard in terms of the purity of its drinking water. So it really varies dramatically by geography and even by municipality, because you can have two towns that are immediately adjacent to each other that either have separate reservoir or sources of their water, or entirely separate companies that provide the water and process and clean it, and who have varying degrees of quality. So it's hard to paint with that brush and say it's sort of the same across the country. I do know, as we just said earlier, that we have at least half the country, 140 plus million or 145 plus million Americans that presently have a PFAS contamination in excess of the EPA's acceptable 4 parts per trillion amount present in their drinking water. And that's just, again, this PFAS category of these forever chemicals, before you start getting into things like fluorides and others that RFK is talking about. So I'm very concerned. I think we know that at least half the nation has water, or is consuming or has access to drinking water that is below what I would consider to be an acceptable level of purity. And I think that, unfortunately, gentlemen, there are probably other elements present in our drinking water that we still have even yet to understand, as we continue to introduce more chemicals and chemical compounds into manufacturing processes. Much like people say about, some recent, vaccines to address COVID and things like that were developed so quickly that we don't really know what the full effects will be over time. So I think this is an issue that needs to become even more prominent and at the top of the list of priorities, for our elected officials. I think that, as we said at the top of the show, clean water is fundamental, not only, of course, to sustaining life, but to sustaining and developing successful economies, both local economies, national and global economies. You cannot do much without having consistent supply of clean drinking water. I think there will be, as we said, one of the questions you had at the top of the show, what excites us from an investment perspective. I think a lot of the new, and again, I don't want to call out any particular company and turn this into an infomercial or an endorsement, but there are several companies that are out there, both in the private and the public markets, that are developing some really interesting technologies that address this problem, particularly this PFAS problem, at the molecular level. And I think that those types of technologies can be applied to the remediation of other contaminants from drinking water. So hopefully, as many things in this world, public-private partnerships, the participation of intrepid entrepreneurs and investors that are dedicated to helping to solve some really sort of fundamental social problems like access to clean drinking water, and I'm hopeful that there are better days ahead when it comes to this topic.
Yeah, we agree. I was just reading on the other day about it was in a medical journal about how much PFAS they found in human bodies, and that was something a little scary. And when I was growing up, my grandparents came from New York, as my parents did. They used to claim that Bronx had the best water tasting in New York than anybody, but I don't know if that was a long time ago, so I don't know if that's it. Anyway, how can
they
people
also claim to have the best Italian food in the Bronx too, Robert? So
that they do, and the best
it's
deli.
Debatable. It's debatable.
Yes, and they had the best deli downtown, and it's been there since, I forget the name of it right off the top of my head. They've been there for like almost 100 years. Anyway, it was really good. Anyway, how can people get a hold of you or find out more about you?
Well, they can go, they can go over to Market Rebellion's website at www.marketrebellion.com. They can follow me on X. My handle on X is MXL. ESQ. They can follow me on Instagram. MXLapresti is my handle there on Instagram. Watch if you watch your major financial news networks, it's likely that you'll see me from time to time talking about these different topics. And doing great podcasts and radio shows like this one. It's really a pleasure to join both of you.
Yeah, I'm sending Fox a note right now that when you're on, they should put a chyron on, have it say that you were just on the water zone. But no, we appreciate it very much, a lot. And you've been a gentleman, and it's super great to talk to you. We appreciate it.
The pleasure's been mine, and thank you for having me, and be happy to join you anytime again.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Chris, that was an awesome interview we did.
I think it was fantastic.
Yeah, I've caught him a couple times on TV, on both Fox and CNN, and just the wealth of information. And, I'm sure he made a lot of money in the market since he worked for Lehman Brothers and understands what to do. But nice to know what they're doing in protecting the world from contamination and getting justice. So I wish him well. So the last thing we got to do, because it's the end of our show, and NBC wants their airspace back so they can do the news to the wonderful world, is to tell our friends and our listeners the most important thing they got to do this week, aside from having a good Easter. Please help
Keep our planet
blue. Because if you like green, you've got to have blue. So everybody, have a good weekend. Feel safe, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks.
NBC News on KCAA Loma